Page 352. Hefsek b'dvarim shehen minyan hasuda. Interrupting with things between the blessing of hamotzi and the eating of bread, but things that have to do with the meal. So not things that have nothing to do with the meal. This is not interruption between washing your hands and making hamotzi. This is interruption after you've made the blessing on bread, before you eat the bread. Im hefsik achar haberacha kodem ha'te'ima. If you interrupt it after the blessing, before tasting, b'dvarim shehem minyan hasuda, with things that have to do with the meal. Kigon, for example, shamar heviu melech, bring salt. Heviu liftan, bring a dip for the bread. Or shamar tenu leploni le'echol, let so and so person eat. Eno chozam varech, you don't have to go back and make a blessing. V'chein amar chal bracha, and if he said tenu lebehema le'echol, feed the animal. Eno chozam varech, you don't go back to eat. Shari asur lo le'adam le'echol kodem shiten machal ifnei behemto. It is forbidden for a person to eat before they feed their animal. You know this halakha?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those of you who have animals, put yourself in a big problem. The Kehillat says that a person shouldn't have animals because of this reason. Why? Kehillat tells a story from the Arizal. No, I'm not a Kabbalist, but I trust the Kehillat when he says he heard a story from the Arizal. There was a man in Sfat who had chickens, and one day he ate before he fed his chickens, and Min HaShamayim, the chickens were suffering. Min HaShamayim, they punished him that year he would die. This is an Isur Deoraita of causing, these animals are dependent on you. They have no way to get food unless you give them food. So it's nice that you're hungry and you want to go to the refrigerator and eat, but your obligation is to feed them first. A wild animal doesn't have that same dependency on you. But the fact that you made certain animals dependent, putting the ethics of that aside for a moment, the fact that there is such an animal in your life that is dependent on you, you have to make sure it has food to eat before you eat.
Domestic.
Work animals and pets.
Minastam, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was probably a bigger problem when Jews lived in the rural areas where they had
We had
chickens
farms,
and
we had
goats
animals,
and
we had sheep and cows
farm
and
animals.
goats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lots
sure.
of feed.
And it would take a while to feed them.
And for sure, the farmer wants to eat something before he goes out to eat, because a lot of animals, it's not putting out a can of food for your cat, it's not sprinkling some, biscuits for your dog, it's real work, feeding animals, real livestock. I was once on a farm here in Fallbrook, where they had 27 horses to take care of. You don't know, every horse has its own diet.
Yep.
There was one horse that was a diabetic. So it couldn't have the apples that horses eat whole apples. It couldn't eat apples because the apples were bad for its blood sugar. So it had a different diet, and for every horse you have to mix 3 parts of this, 2 parts of that, 1 part, and you make food and you put it in front of the horse. The person I was staying with, they woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you have to do everything before it gets hot. You have to clean the horse's stable. You have to put out the horse's food. You have to wait till it eats. You have to wash it down. And then by the time 5:30 rolls around, everything has to be done, and that's when they sit down to eat breakfast. It's a real work. It's not a
Farm life.
Yep, farm life, yeah.
Don't worry, I stayed in the air conditioner.
People pay money to go and be ranch hands in those places, right? To live the farm life. They pay
So
$3.
we do it for our girls' summer program. We take the girls up to the mountains to
Oh, really?
live in they have to know what it's like. Take care of an animal. They put on boots because your shoes are gonna get dirty. You gotta step in some stuff,
Yeah, you
touch
might
some
step
stuff
on
you don't want to
cowboy.
touch. You have to take.
Usually.
A lot of camps do horseback riding. So by us, that's right. You can ride a horse for an hour if you take care of it for 3 hours. That's what we do, and that's part of the responsibility.
That's a lot of
It's a responsibility.
Well,
Wake up
you
with
get
dawn,
the horse
and they're
sweaty.
scooping stuff up, and they're
Perfect,
cleaning, and they're washing, and to bathe a horse, and to brush a horse, and to feed a horse, and to saddle a horse. It's important. It's a charut. It's responsibility. It's not the same as checking your emails on your iPod when you wake up in the morning. It's a different generation. Right? See later, we have to look at the details of what does it mean you can't eat before you feed your animal? What if your animal doesn't need to eat right now? What if you want to just taste something before you go out? It's not eating, it's not sitting down for a meal. It's I'm drinking something on the way out. What can you do? What kind of animal? Clearly it's important enough that you can say it after you say hamotzi. Because you don't want, after you say hamotzi, before you eat the bread, you can say, go feed the animals. I forgot to feed the animals, go feed them. Because you know that until they get fed, you can't eat. Is it really that strict? You couldn't have tasted hamotzi and then gone out to feed the animal? We have to see those halachot. We're going to do that in chapter 23. We're in subsection 23. We're now in subsection 16. So it's not so far away from it.
Does that depend on one mitzvah has precedence over another mitzvah?
course, here you have the complication for where we did the bracha on the bread.
Well, here it's written in the Torah. Meaning here the Torah says, let's Shema some. In Shema we say, V'natati esev b'sadach livim tegra, and I will give grass in the fields for your animals, v'achalta v'savata, and then you will eat and be satisfied.
Oh.
In the order that Hashem puts in the Torah is first animals will eat, and then you will feed yourself.
It's mina d'oraita, which is.
Well, that's going to be the argument. You're right. That's going to be the argument. If I recall correctly, because once somebody asked me about this, and I looked and it's not so clear maybe from the Rambam if this is it's a suggestion from the Torah or if it's an actual obligation from the Torah. And that would make a difference in terms of, you're right, you just said Hashem's name, and you're risking saying Hashem's name in vain. So does that work or not? That we're going to have to analyze that halakha inside and see what are the poskim when they see this pasuk and they see the Gemara that's discussing that, what can one learn from this? I believe I once wrote an answer about this also in the Shiviti form, but I don't remember what the question was that I was answering. But we'll see this when we get there. Ted Zayin. If you interrupt it with words that have nothing to do with hamutzi, but they have to do with a meal. I mean, everything we said until now, past the salt, past the dip, feed the animals, all of those have to do directly with hamutzi, because without the salt, or without the dip, or without feeding the animals, you can't eat your bread. What are the things that have to do with a meal, but not with hamutzi? Kagon, shamar heviu tafshil. I mean, you can bring in the food already. You don't have to bring in the food to eat hamutzi. Nonetheless, you still don't go back and make a blessing on those things, because they are part of the meal, even though you shouldn't do them. Once you said them, it is what it is.
I'm confused, Rabbi.
Yes.
Okay. You said if we do hamotzi and you forgot to feed the animals, would I not do it?
So you have to wait to be able to eat the bread. So if you told someone to go, you're not supposed to talk between the blessing and the eating of the bread.
So
but if you did and you told them to go feed the animals, it's not considered an interruption because you didn't interrupt. It's part of what you need to do in order to eat the bread.
You can't proceed.
Right. And that. So the question: what about the rest of the meal?
Or like take the dessert out of the oven so it take the pie out so it cools off for later. You know, then it's not really related to the
hamutzi, but it has to do with the meal in front of you. And there's an argument about whether that's true or not, but that's Maran's opinion. Page 353. V'afilu amar heviu sakin or kli sudan. He said, bring a knife or bring plates or forks or bowls or spoons. Eino chozam varech. He does not have to go back and make a blessing and eat. Some want to say that's only the knife that you have to use for hamutzi. Others say no. Once you can bring a knife, it doesn't make a difference what you're bringing the knife for, as long as it's an utensil for the meal. But if you said, hey, give this guy a loaf of bread so you can make a bracha on, even though you weren't planning to give him from your bread, because that's why you're telling him to bring him his own bread, so it has to do with hamutzi, but not your hamutzi. Isn't the difference?
Yeah.
I have a roll. I don't want to share it with you. I'm saying I made a bracha. Oh, Jack showed up. Can you please give him a roll? Now that has nothing to do with my hamutzi. It has to do with his hamutzi. But still, it's not a problem. You don't go back and make a blessing. And you might say maybe that's because he's dependent on you and he needs you to eat, to give him permission to take bread. Even though Jack is rich, and he has a lot to eat, he still can interrupt in order to give him bread. So it doesn't even have to be from your hamutzi or from your meal, but it has to do with hamutzi and meals in general. That's not considered an interruption. Obviously, all this is better not to do. You're talking about you did it, or you needed to do it for whatever reason. See, people would never do this before they make hamotzi. They would never do this after they wash their hands, when there's not even a problem then. Here we're talking about after you made a blessing, Hashem's name in vain, one of the 10 commandments. All of this is okay. Based on what we said above, when you say bring the salt, and we said you don't have to go back and wash again, that was even if the bread is clean and good bread, or even if it's seasoned and flavored bread, or they already put salt on the bread, all of that still applies. Is that what Maran said? Why is he saying what he's saying right now? Why is he talking about bread that already has salt in it? You don't have to dip it in salt. Maran in the previous halakha on page 346, Maran said that which you need to eat bread with salt is only because the bread has no flavor. Or you have to dip it in something because the bread is a coarse bread that's not very comfortable to eat. But if you have some kind of bread that is easy to eat, or it's flavored already, or seasoned already, it's salted already, you don't need to dip it in salt. Yeah, we said this halakha together in 346. I'll read it to you again.
That's not on Shabbos, maybe. On Shabbos.
But because
Lo yifsa. Look at Maran, page
all bread is
346.
baked with salt.
No, Arabs don't make their bread with salt. Their pitot you buy without salt. It's just flour and water. It tastes like matzah. That's why they give you little zatar baggies with your bread.
But like the bread you buy for Kiddush on Shabbat.
Yeah, it has salt,
in it.
sure.
So do you dip it in salt?
What did I say? Do I dip my bread in salt?
Not on Shabbat?
You do it because otherwise people will
Because
protest.
people say, oh, Rabbi forgot the salt. And then anyways they say, like this Shabbat, it happened this Shabbat. I sat down and then put salt. Nobody brought salt, so I didn't use salt. So I said, Rabbi, you forgot the salt. I said,
Then you
okay,
said
please
remember.
bring the salt.
Oh no, you said remember the.
I said remember
I thought we were
Kola. Right, that's what I did.
yeah.
Baruch was right.
Yeah.
And those who were in Kola understood, and those who were not in Kola had no idea what it was like.
And then
Yeah,
you found
okay.
you found a few
Let's read
grains
together,
of,
page
a few grains
346.
of salt,
It's important.
on the bread.
You know, more and more I think that if you were to review halakha, forget all the details under the 2 lines. You should translate well Maran, everything Maran says, and the Rama says, on top of the 2 lines. And just review over and over and over and over again, Maran and Rama, you'll know halakha better. Lo yifza, and anyways, when you read it, you'll remember what we spoke about in Kol, like more or less. That there was a conversation about animals, there was a conversation about feeding them, but you have to remember all the detail. Lo yifza, you cannot cut the bread. Unless they bring for you salt or liftan. What is liftan?
Is that like this?
Remember the book that Rabbi Yosef quoted about opium on Shabbat?
Oh yeah,
Remember he quoted a halachic encyclopedia?
yeah.
It was called, remember the name of the book? The Aruch? Remember that?
Oh,
Was it here for the
Yeah, Pirush.
lecture?
Kol davar ne'echal imapat. Anything eaten with the bread. And he says it's in the Aruch. That's the same encyclopedia. It's quoting the same book. L'lapet b'pursat b'tziyah. You can't make hamotzi until you have salt or some dip in order to flavor the bread that you're about to eat. Hummus, trina,
So you can use that sort of
madbucha.
salt.
Remember, the Kabbalists want salt, and the Kabbalists want salt dipped 3 times. Because 3 times Hashem's name is 26 times 3 comes out to the same gematria as bread. Bread and salt are the same gematria. That's really Kabbalah. According to halakha, the reason we dip our bread is because the bread is bland. And how can you make a blessing on a bland food unless you add flavor to it?
Isn't it also derived indirectly from Torah mitzvah of you should make all your offerings with salt?
Right. That's why you have salt on the table. In terms of dipping your bread in the salt is you're right. We did mention this.
So that means that in Rosh Hashanah, if you have a honey challah, you should put honey on.
Yeah.
Uh-oh,
don't even know what
back
you
to the
just did.
honey story.
Let me finish reading this halakha,
Okay.
and then I get the honey for you. Let's do it.
That's
Vim hi nikiya, and if the bread is clean, what does clean bread mean?
sweet.
Not non-flavored.
that what you call whole grain bread or multi-grain bread is not what Himaran means when he says multi-grain.
Sifted flour.
Yeah, sifted flour, as
Without the
opposed to,
bran.
we're not talking about like
The Rambam
bleached
talks
flour
about that,
and
yeah.
talking about
Blanched.
flour in terms of, sometimes you eat flour, that's a rock, take it out. That's what you bring back from the field. You don't have time to bake fancy bread today. You have time to bake a little bit of bread. So that challah, you need to add some kind of, you have to improve it in order to make a hamutzi on it. But if it's sifted flour, oshi metubelet betavlin, or it's seasoned with some kind of seasoning. Someone recently brought me a challah with rosemary in it. Or b'melach ke'en shelanu, or like salt, like our bread, says Maran, meaning our bread has salt. Or you intend to eat bland bread. You don't want salt in your bread. You like bread, flour, and water flavor. There are some people who love matzah. They love that flavor. It's not, what do they call it, the DSM? It's not in the DSM. It's okay. It's okay to like. Eino tzarich lehamtin. You don't have to wait. Meaning, if you either have seasoning in your bread, or you have salt in your bread, or you have some kind of refined bread that tastes better on its own, or you want to eat bread that is bland in flavor, you do not have to wait for salt before you make a hamutzi.
So what's it going to do it 3 times?
Kabbalah.
Does it? Right.
Kabbalah.
So I thought the reason for salt had
Those
to do with the
people follow what
korban.
other people do.
Yuzev, also with the
Okay,
korban.
so I
That's the
never-
reason why we have salt on the table.
But
But again, Kabbalah. So understand now. Challah with honey. Okay, let's go to the challah with honey. Is challah with honey a hamutzi?
No. Wait, it could.
Okay, Baruch, I would ask you, but I think the recipe came from Edith. Does that have Edith's cake, the spelled cake with blueberries? What are the main ingredients in it?
Spelt flour, blueberries, sometimes they'll sweeten it with a little maple syrup,
Maple syrup.
and I think it has a little yeast.
Yeast. Okay.
Oh, yeast, right.
So, what's the difference between the cake that Edith and Rachel make for Shabbat for us, and the challah that we eat on Shabbat?
The blueberries and
The blueberries
And
and
the
the
maple
sweetener, the maple syrup or the
Or
agave,
whatever.
whatever you're gonna put in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now watch this. Your challah, you call it challah because it's not a challah. You call it a challah. A challah that has inside of it flour, water, yeast, 15.5 cups of sugar. No, that's some crazy amount of sugar. I don't know what it is.
yeah,
Honey, raisins, cinnamon. At which point does your challah become a cake? I mean, what's the difference in a cake and a challah? The only difference is if it's sweet or not.
A little more sugar.
That's all. So really, the challah that people are eating and calling it challah is not challah.
Oh, you've had.
It's
yeah,
cake
yeah.
in what they are shaping as what they know
Yeah,
what
they
to be
put a lot of
challah.
sugar in some of those challahs, and they put a little egg white on the top to make it shiny.
For sure. They even put sugar in the egg white to make it sparkly on top.
Yeah.
Oh.
Tricky.
I used to go to people's houses,
That's-
everyone had that commercial white with sugar
Yeah,
challah with
right.
with the glaze on the top, and I said, "What is this?"
I was in New York,
How
in
can someone say-
Manhattan for Shabbat.
I hate it. This-
Oh, you gotta taste this challah. It was braided challah, sugar white challah, and in between the braids they had put marshmallow fluff and chocolate chips.
Ugh.
Now, they made a hamotzi on it. And I said, listen, just to them, I wasn't gonna argue with anybody's health. Tell me for a moment what the difference between this is and a marshmallow chocolate babka cake. By the way, no Russian grandmother in her life dreamt of putting marshmallow fluff in her babka cake. So I don't mean to offend anybody's babka. I'm just saying.
Is this true?
What's the difference? What's the difference between that and your challah? Just the shape. The shape doesn't change the bracha of something. Many of the things that people are eating, they think it's not a hamotzi.
I thought if you made a meal out of it, you could do a hamotzi.
Okay, right. So if you eat a lot of cake, and that's your meal, you would make a hamotzi on it, because that would be the halakha. Remember the pata baba kisanin? We spoke about the halakha, the stuffed pocket bread. Right. That's a lot of challah. It has to be your meal, and it's complicated. The pata baba kisanin is a complicated sugya. Why not just regular challah? My grandmother's challah didn't even have eggs in it. Because according to many Sfaradim, once you put eggs, it's a cake. It was flour and water, there was yeast, and some salt. Zeh, that was challah. That's what a laf is. That's what a pita is. We start adding things to the bread, it's fine, but it loses its status of a hamutzi bread, at least a pure hamutzi bread. Let's now go to the dipping in the honey. Why do we dip bread in honey?
For sweet tea.
I'm just including the Jewish people because it's not my minhag to dip bread in honey. In fact, minhag of most Sephardic Jews was not to eat honey at all on Rosh Hashanah. How could you eat honey on Rosh Hashanah? Why not? Dip the apple in the honey.
Right.
I was taught wrong all these years. The Ben Ish Chai says that according to Kabbalah, there's no greater offense than eating honey on Rosh Hashanah.
But everything has
Honey-
to be sweet leaves. Right?
Honey, according to Kabbalah, is judgment. It's gold. It's the golden calf. It's din. Yeah. What is chesed? Chesed is sugar. Doesn't mean you're seeing white sugar. Sugar. From a sugar cane, sugar. The minhag in Baghdad was to boil the apples in sugar, and they ate like a what do you call it, compote, or like an apple food that was cooked
It tastes
together.
like applesauce.
Okay,
Yeah.
but let's not cook it that much. It was like a little apple slices in sugar. That's what they ate in Rosh Hashanah. To dip the apple in the honey, if you were a Kabbalist. So I have all my Kabbalists dipping their bread in salt every Shabbat, because that's what they do, because they're Kabbalists. Come Rosh Hashanah time, and they busy breaking Kabbalah and eating golden calves.
So after Rosh Hashanah, like when you get to Sukkot, it's okay then to purify
So
that
I'm
sin?
not here. I'm not in Mekubal, so I don't actually know when they stopped the limitations on. But definitely on. Think about all the things the Mekubalim don't eat on Rosh Hashanah. They don't eat nuts because nuts are the same gematria as chit. They
Right.
don't eat grapes because black grapes are from the side of judgment. They don't eat why wine is okay. I'm not sure because I don't know what the difference in the Kabbalistic glycemic index. I don't know what makes things red and not red. I'm not sure how this works exactly, but there are certain foods they don't eat.
So do you use salt on Sukkot?
Yes,
But you also have honey for people who use it. Is that what-
yes. I put the honey because if not, they scream at me.
Right. What do you do?
On Rosh Hashanah, I don't use honey
So you
Why?
use salt on the
Why?
bread and stuff.
because the Mekubalim they scream me in the other direction. So I just
Is all the food sweet? Like, is that?
that's not a minhag. That's an. It's kind of like the eating
Just
of
an
dairy
excuse.
on Shavuot. Yeah. I doubt that there's any Jewish community for whom dairy food was a staple of what they ate. And I may be wrong. It could be that there's somewhere, but at least in the Sephardic communities, I
Shepherds.
know dairy was sometimes eaten. Parts of your cheeses, maybe milk. In both Morocco and Yemen, nobody drank milk. In fact, that's where the big question about. See, there's a famous tshuva from Rabbi Yitzchak Ratzabi, when he was asked, "How do you say that in Yemen we didn't keep Chalav Yisrael? My grandfather in Yemen never bought milk from the Arabs." He's like, "Right. The reason your grandfather never bought milk from the Arabs because in Yemen we didn't drink milk. Milk was something you used very rarely, so they didn't have this culture of drinking milk. In fact, when my mother's family came to Israel." They were, in school. It was the depression in Israel. It was the tzena in those days. They would ration out how much milk you could have, how many eggs you could have. It was very famous that the Moroccan Jews would always swap out their milk and their chocolate milk and their everything that they got with the Ashkenazi neighbors for things like meat or whatever, chicken or whatever else they ate, because they didn't know what to do. What am I going to do with all this milk? I've never had this in my life. So Shavuot, how did it become a pizza, lasagna, eggplant, parmesan, cheesecake? How did that happen? There's a little minhag. What do you mean little minhag? That on Shavuot you should eat a little bit of dairy to remember a miracle that happened with the dairy. A famous story. Maybe someone to say Torah is like dairy, or whatever. They wanted to go with that. Fine. That meant, for example, in Turkey, that after tefillah you had a little kiddush and they had some dairy borekas or whatever they served, and then you went home and had a meal. Not a dairy meal, not lasagna and cheesecake and all this stuff. Today, if you don't have cheesecake on Shavuot, it's like you're violating one of the 10 Commandments. I have a lot of tzah. I don't like dairy food. Every year Shavuot, I suffer 2 days straight. My wife always makes me my own food for Shavuot. How much pasta can you eat already? much lasagna can you put inside your body before you feel like a lasagna? A certain. How many slices of cheesecake? 3. 4. 1 for each man?
Yeah.
Arlene has self-control. So, dipping the challah in the honey is fine. If that's your minhag, do it. But baking the challah with honey, I don't understand. Let's say the raisins are not such a big deal on their own. Yeah, you can imagine you could get. But the honey, once you start sweetening your challah, it's very hard to find bread today that doesn't have sugar. In general.
Right.
They put sugar everywhere, but in bread especially.
That's where you buy it.
What? Depends where you buy it, that's right. I'm talking about mass commercial baking bread. It's important. To make
Marie
hummus,
Antoinette said, let them eat cake.
and that's what happens. Everyone's eating cake. So back on page 353. So now, when he says, let's read the sentence again. Bedin hamvoar le'el, and Yud Zayin on page 353. 3 lines in the middle. You see there's a Yud Zayin? Sorry. Bedin hamvoar le'el, that which we explained above. Shim hefsik achar b'achar kodem v'tihima b'amirat heviu melach. That if you made an interruption between the blessing and the tasting, and you say, bring salt, you don't have to go back and make a blessing again. Thank you. I won't be able to speak while I do so afterwards. Thank you. That's even if the bread was very refined, or it was seasoned and flavored, or there already was salt inside of it. Meaning, when there's already salt in the bread, do you have to have salt with the bread? No. So what happens if you say, bring the salt?
Oh, okay.
Now, what's he telling you? Even when the bread already has salt, you can say, bring the salt.
Why would you say bring for everybody else? Because then there's no purpose to bringing the salt.
Not if you believe what he said originally, but if it is part of the korban, you do have a reason.
That's if you make a korban copy.
All right.
I was from.
So here it's an interesting
What have I
question.
brought?
Why? So the Rashba says it's not true. The Rashba disagrees. The Rashba says that because you don't need salt, then of course it's an interruption.
Right.
But Maran is basing himself off the Rambam. The Rambam who says that you're allowed to interrupt for anything that has to do with the meal. So the salt has something to do with the meal, even if it doesn't have to do with your hamotzi, and therefore it's not an interruption. That's the practical ramification of those two opinions. I would have loved to do the funnel for you, but I just noticed the time right now. It's time to do Arvit and Stichot, so please, we'll hold it here. Yeah, let's do one more sentence so I can just finish for time. בכל הדברים האמורים לעיל. With everything we said above, page 54, שמפסיק בהם במיוחד המוציא לבנתימה, לך חוזר מברך, that if you interrupted with these things, you don't have to go back and make a blessing. היינו דווקא בדיעבד. This is only after the fact. You already did it. But intentionally, אינו רשאי להפסיק בין ברכת המוציא לבנתימה כלל. You cannot make any interruptions at all. Remember the Ramah says that. I told you then, we're going to have to figure out if the Ramah is explaining Maran or the Ramah is being stricter than Maran. Ramah says all those things that Maran said you can make interruption about is only b'diavad, not l'chatchila. And even go feed the animal. Even that, ideally, you should not say it between the blessing and the tasting. And therefore, that which the Ramah wrote after Maran is not a contradiction on Maran, but it's an explanation of Maran. And we understand that all of these interruptions, you should not do them intentionally. But you should only do them if they already happened. You should only not do it. You should only not go back and wash if these things already happened. Okay? We'll hold it here, and God willing, we'll continue on next Monday.